random question here, no relation to anything. In pitch, what most GA airplanes have what kind of stability? Positive dynamic?
Yes.
Good. What is not a primary flight control? Aileron, rudders, or flaps? Which basic flight maneuver increases the load factor of an airplane compared to straight and level flight? Okay, good. Just random questions I found somewhere. Cool. So you are gonna have a quiz today, as you guys should know. Sorry I didn't show up last Thursday. Something popped up, couldn't come in. But I'm sure you guys still learned wonderfully, right? It's gonna be a 25 question quiz, okay? Not a whole lot. I don't know what that weight is in your total grade off the top of my head. My biggest tip is to read the entire question. They are trick questions. That's the way that it is. We didn't make these questions. These are right from the written, okay? And you guys should have gone over everything, at least in class or in the study material. They are trick questions. It's not us, okay? We're not trying. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just the way that it is, okay? Questions so far? Cool. There's a sign-in sheet going around. It'll end up back up front on this table. And we'll take a break or two today and just sign it at some point so you can get credit for attendance. How is everybody? All right, a little more pep than last time. Cool. From like 4 people, but nobody else. Oh, there's some laughs. Good. All right. So who read ahead and knows what we're talking about today? All right. What are we talking about today?
Types of aircraft certification, reports, documentation.
Yeah. And once again, you'll hear me say a couple times, this is how I remember. This isn't too important, right? I will say that. I'll give you the rundown of the important stuff, right? But we are going to learn extra stuff today. That's never a bad thing, okay? There's a lot of acronyms today. So if I say to write it down or take a picture, you should really write it down or take a picture and really remember that. Aviation is all about acronyms, right? Yeah. Yeah. There's actually a song that like somebody did with the Muppets called Aviation Acronyms, Muppets. If you look it up. And it's hard to follow, but it's funny. All right. Give it another minute. Anything exciting happened this week? Not to be like our personal, but there's a lot. There's a lot in aviation news, right? Does anybody have questions about anything that happened? I'm not going to give you my speculation. I might give you the facts, but.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Why don't they do it every 2 years? Okay, NTSB instead of 1.
So the NTSB is not a government agency. It is private, right? And so what they do, and there was a crash here, a deadly crash here last year around this time with one of our friends, and we still don't have the full report on that. Now, it takes so long because they take every little bit of that airplane. There was a picture of like a baggie filled with like the salt packets in the airplane in the river. That will go to a warehouse in DC somewhere, and they lay out everything. They will know how, if obviously snacks were served, they will know exactly what passengers ate what, how much was missed. They will know everything about that flight. And so they break every single thing down. They're going to find things that were wrong with that airplane that had nothing to do with the crash, but it'll be in that report. And it'll be hundreds of pages long in some cases, especially with one of this magnitude. But what they do is they lay everything out. They break everything down, figure out what was broken, what happened, what caught on fire, unfortunately, who died when, based on the impact and stuff like that. They'll look at the site. Obviously, it was underwater, so it's a little bit harder. They'll review air traffic control. Those guys in the tower that was controlling, you get immediately pulled from your station, drug tested and relieved until further notice. That's just
Maintenance records. So that-
maintenance records, everything, pilots, they go into all their training. And so it does take a while to get all that information in one piece. And then what happens with that information is they give the facts, no speculations, and then they tell the FAA recommendations on things to fix. Recommendations, not putting them into laws. But when US Airways crashed Sully in our Hudson River, they had I think it was 50 or 60 new recommendations for new rules, and they only took 10 of them, right? Because some of them are just, great. I couldn't give you an example, but some are just too much.
That's like a bottleneck. The FAA is a bottleneck because there's a lot, the NTSB gets frustrated because they know what actually happened.
Yep.
And so they'll make these recommendations and FAA just sort of drags their feet on it. There's over 1,000 recommendations that are really good recommendations that will make air safety so much safer, and they're not doing anything.
But our NTSB is so good that we go to other countries. Other countries invite us to go investigate their airplane crashes and stuff, because they know that they'll get answers. And I'm sure they're working on a bunch of projects, little ones. They'll, even though the one that happened here was a 4-seater airplane, they still bring all the debris and they break everything down and everything. It's laid out in the warehouse, like an airplane, the wings are where they're supposed to be. It's all laid out perfectly. They rebuild it pretty much.
So does the FAA, they make the test questions too, right?
Yep.
So I see discrepancies in those test questions, such as the instance of what's the benefit of having 2 spark plugs or 2 magnetos on an engine, airplane engine. And I've come across 2 answers.
Yep.
One is that it distributes heat evenly, and the other one's performance. And so it's okay, guys, which one is it?
And so, humans are not perfect. The government definitely is not perfect, right? So there are going to be questions on the written test, not that we're going to give you, but there are 3 questions in that pool of 600 questions that are just incorrect. And you just have to know which ones those are. And you'll come across them in your practice tests and stuff if you.
But how do you know which one? I'm ready to call FAA and quiz them, be like,
Yeah,
which
and-
one is it? And then have
I've
it
never
documented.
done that, but you have full authority to do so.
Right.
Good luck getting anything from it if you do, let me know. But that's not us, that's the FAA, there's nothing we can do about it.
I also see going through this course before and going through online ones, it's just rushed. And that's how the government does stuff. They just throw stuff at you. And so there's a better way to actually do these classes and break them out, maybe make them longer. There's just information overload. Also, there's the terminology, a lot of new terminology for people, acronyms.
Yep.
And then it's easy for people to get confused, and they purposely word things on that test to mentally twist your mind.
Like what he said, there are trick questions. You guys are going through this super rushed course, right? Who thinks that this course is rushed? Please raise your hand. It's a lot of information, right? How many of you are in school and have a full-time job? Most of us, right? So you're doing this almost college level class, right? With the information that you're supposed to study and retain and come to class. This college level class while doing another full-time thing or 2, right? It's a lot. And we know that. So my recommendation to you, now I didn't have this luxury because I did a ground school with my college. There were deadlines for stuff. Excuse me. You guys are going to take a final. You're going to pass the class, right? Everybody's going to pass the class, right? And you're going to get a certificate that says you can go take the written. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? If you just barely skimmed by on that written, yeah, you'll probably pass the actual test. Why not take another week or 2 of just studying? You don't have to show up here, right? You got a week or 2 that you can just hardcore study. Don't let it don't let it lag on and take a break right after this class, but doesn't mean you need to take it right away. I think that certificate's good for a couple months.
When they say 90 days.
90 days, 3 months. So I would say, don't wait the whole 90 days, but like, as soon as this class is done and you have it passed, go schedule that written for a week or two out. And study your butt off using practice tests and stuff right before, right? Improve your knowledge. Just because you're done with class doesn't mean you have to stop, right? And I'll teach you guys test taking strategies and stuff as they come with like the charts and stuff. It gets a little bit, there's more hacks like I talked about last time with the book. Cool. And aviation is dangerous, but we train for these situations and we try to learn something from the crashes, right? As unfortunate as it is, new rules will come from both of these accidents and we will be able to learn from them. Now, I guess in about a month, the preliminary reports come out, so we will get basic facts about what happened, their first findings. You know, it might not be everything, but they will have initial findings. In the case at this airport, it took a month for the report to come out and they were like, look, there was water in the fuel tanks. We found water. So it's probably water related. They didn't say that, but they said, hey, there was water in the carburetors. You know, he was this kind of pilot, it was this many hours, you know, this airplane did this, it was sitting for this long. That's the kind of stuff that's going to come out in the preliminary report.
In that they didn't have the cameras, but he didn't have enough time from one point where the camera saw him, from the time that the camera saw him pull behind the building
Yeah.
to do a proper pre-flight check. So they think he did not even test his fuel.
So, did everybody hear about that crash?
They brought it up on the slide.
Oh, good. Not good.
Briefly about it.
Yeah, he was our hangar neighbor. He was a really great guy, but you know, he would have wanted us to learn something, right? And that's the best that we can do, right? All right, so this is the fun stuff. No, here's-
Advance. We even switched the batteries.
I got a new clicker. Look at that thing. So we're going to talk about documents and inspections today. This is not the fun stuff, but it is stuff that is obviously important. You're going to get tons of questions on this, and I will give you some examples of those questions. Oops. All right, so some documents. There are 4 items that must be on board the airplane at all times. 2 certificates are the airworthiness and registration. And then the operating handbook and the weight and balance information. Those documents must be online. We're going to break them down separately. 2 of them can be found in the airplane flight manual, which is the POH and the weight and balance. The other 2 are just going to be stickers in the airplane. Or we'll talk about it. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. So how to remember, we have this beautiful acronym. I used Arrow, not Marrows, but you know, we will use Marrows. So this is your acronym. This is something you will want to write down and or take a picture of. So we have a minimum equipment list, airworthiness certificate, registration, a radio certificate, an operator's manual, weight and balance, and supplements. Who knows what all of those things are? Nobody. Maybe. Oh, you think you do? Go ahead, you hop up here. You can teach. So a minimum equipment list is an FAA approved document that allows select equipment to be inoperative. This is a list. It sounds backwards. It sounds stupid. This is not me. This is the FAA. But it's everything that's allowed to not be working in the airplane for that specific kind of flight. Doesn't that sound backwards? I guess it's easier to list the things that are allowed to be broken than it is to list the things that can't be. All in-op equipment comes with limitations on the operations. Say you have like one piece of equipment is inoperative. That airplane's good to fly during the day VFR, right? Say it was a light that was broken. They could fly during the day, right? But hey, you can't fly nighttime without that light. So you're limited to certain operations. Does that make sense how that works? This is what it'll look like. I don't have an example of one for you. Equipment must be repaired within the repair time. So some of these things, you're not gonna have to look at one of these for your written test or probably to take your check ride even, right? I've never actually flown an airplane with one of these. But, and we'll talk about why, but there are repair times, you know, hey, it is broken, that's okay to fly, but you do need to get it fixed in this amount.
It's the remote thing and fixing it.
All right. So airworthiness certificate. They are issued for a specific airplane at the time of manufacturing. Okay. Does anybody know when the airworthiness certificate expires? Good. It was a trick question. An airworthiness inspection never expires if it's maintained properly. And there's another acronym that goes into this. That makes me so upset. There's another acronym that goes into this. I don't know if we're about to touch on it now or a second, but it will be AARO. There's our mouse. I really don't want to have to stand over here like this. It must be displayed to all passengers, pilots, everything. Okay, so when you get on an airliner, you don't do it because they won't like you, but you could ask to see the airworthiness certificate of that airplane. It should be right in the front. Our registration, on the other hand, is how it works. All right, it's issued to the owner of the airplane. Does anybody know how long it takes, when this expires? 7 years. Ah, it was changed. Perfect. Earlier, it said 3 years. And I yelled at Nicholas. I was like, hey, that's the wrong one. It was recently changed in the last, I say recently, since I started, when I started 4 years ago, it was 3 years, but now it's 7, another prime number, right? So every 7 years, you need to get a new registration. Do you know why it's 7 years? So they got tired of everybody trying to renew their registration every 3 years. They give them a little bit more time. If you get a new airplane, you have to register it with yourself, right? There's temporary registration. This one doesn't have to be displayed, but it does need to be in the airplane. So a lot of times you'll see, we have like a little pocket for our airworthiness certificate. This will be right behind it. A radio license, ignore the FCC part, not important. Issued to the owner of the aircraft, and it's needed for operational international operations. So if you want to leave the country, your airplane must have a radio certificate. It's just like a little inspection, quick little. Pilots also have a radio licenses that they need to get. If I wanted to fly, me and my airplane both need radio licenses. We're not to the pilot yet, so ignore that.
Expiration date.
No expiration date. For the pilot, it's just like a quick test. For the airplane, you get a sticker put on the airplane, the outside of the airplane. Pilot operator handbook. They come in all shapes and sizes. I have a Cougar, which is my favorite light twin aircraft, also the one that Sam had crashed last year. And I did all my training in that. It's not my favorite because he crashed it. And just a 172 with. Do you want that? No. With the round gauge 172. Very different sizes, right? This is the bigger airplane. This airplane has 2 engines. This one has 1 engine. Look at the difference in size, right? It's just up to the manufacturer. This is made by Cessna. This is made by Gulfstream. I have flown a Gulfstream technically. Not the cool one, but it's a document developed by the airplane's manufacturer that tells you about the airplane, right? Tells you about the fuel system, tells you about the engines, tells you about the avionics, right? The manual is not approved by the FAA and is not specific to an individual airplane. This does not have a tail number written on it, right? This is just for all 172s that fit this description in here. Has these avionics with this engine and stuff like that. Not all 172s have to follow this, follow this book.
Do they hereafter get updated, such as after the, of course, the older ones don't,
Yeah, so, is there a year?
revision.
This one, original issued 2005 and revised on 2006. So, yeah, they get revised, but a lot of times the airplane's made, nothing's really gonna change, right? For the new airplanes, they might get new ones. The manual provides general information about the operation of the aircraft, is not kept and cannot be substituted by an AFM. Okay? An AFM is an approved flight manual. Can you guess which one is approved by the FAA? It's this one. This book contains the same stuff, except it's been approved. Both of them are legal to be used in the airplane. Pilots must comply with this information, which is specific to that make and model of the airplane, usually by serial number. This one for the Cougar has a spot where you can put serial number and registration number, like the tail number of the airplane. And you can change some things in here, like the weight and balance. Obviously, if you can make this airplane specific. It is not currently airplane specific, but it could be made airplane specific. Cool. They all have these same sections in them. Now, this is never something that I learned initially, and I kind of wish that I did, because this is a pretty big book, right? I'd say. So if I want to learn about emergency procedures, I have to go and flip through until this thing up here in the corner says emergency procedures. I had no idea that I could just, all section 3s in all of these books are going to be emergency procedures. And same with all the other numbers. No idea. I was just never taught that way. So I had no clue. Wish I did know it. So if you would like to memorize these 9 more things, this would be a good thing to take a picture of. It is not necessary for the written at all. They're not going to say what section of a POH is going to have the weight and balance in it. There's not a question, anything like that. But if you do want to continue flight training and go further than just the written, it's a good information to know. It doesn't hurt.
Be nice if they put the emergency procedures first.
Yeah, you would.
So-
That really is. The weight and balance must be specific to the airplane, that N number. Does everybody know what I mean when I say N number? A lot of feedback. Don't make you get up and do jumping jacks or something. I don't think the floor can handle it, but I will make you do it.
And North America.
Yep.
X is Mexico.
Well, not, well, N is United States.
United States. Right.
I forget what Canada, I don't know. That must include empty weight, CG, and arm. Does everybody know what CG is? Beautiful. Does everybody know what arm is? It's the distance that something is from a datum plane. You'll learn about it. It's horrible. Sorry. Will be completed by an AMP or an approved FAR, often found in the POH. So if we were to go to the weight and balance section, notice I'm flipping through because I still don't have them all memorized. You can see charts in here. Charts that tell you how much everything weighs, how much the basic empty weight is, things like that. Remember, this is not N number specific, so it isn't, actually accurate, but we have those documents downstairs for our airplanes. Anyway, all this is saying is you have to have an airplane specific chart that says how much everything weighs in the airplane so that you can do a weight and balance if you wanted to. Should you do a weight and balance before every flight? You should. Who does a weight and balance every single flight? Those of us who are flight training. Yeah, I see you back there looking at me like, Ella doesn't make me do that. We usually teach that around the solo section. I know how much weight I can fit in my airplanes that I fly every day with me in the airplane, right? I can take 2 average sized people, right? If 3 kids want to go for a flight, I'll do the weight and balance. If 1 larger adult wants to go for a flight, I'm gonna do a weight and balance, right? But I generally know what's in the limitations, right? Because I fly these things every day. Supplements, anytime equipment is installed or removed that was not original from the manufacturer, you need to have a supplement. It's in the maintenance logbooks. I could not break into the maintenance, forgot what the code was to the maintenance office. And I could not break in and give you the big giant binder full of supplements and airplane maintenance logs. I'm so sorry. User guide of installed equipment. Examples, if you update the GPS, new glass display, new engine monitor, right? All that stuff is supplemental. You want to, there needs to be a log of it, a record of it. Maintenance inspections, here's another acronym in a second, I guess. Regulations place primary responsibility for maintaining aircraft in an airworthy condition on the owner or operator. The owner and operator are in charge of maintaining the aircraft in an airworthy condition. Do I need to say it again? That might be important for some reason. I don't know. The owner is the person who has the legal title of the aircraft. Now, for example, does the guy that owns one of the airplanes down there and lets us use it for flight training, does he know when all the inspections are due off the top of his head? No, because we manage it for him, right? And if his airplane got into some trouble and it was not up to date, it would still be his fault. So he puts a lot of trust in us, right? So we take care of it. You know, we want to keep using his airplane. When an airplane is leased back, oh, I just said that. So here's this beautiful acronym. It's called AAviate. Cool. Well, this one says Aviate. Notice how it says annual inspection / airworthiness directives. I like to just put another little A right here and just separate them, and you'll see why here in a second. Okay, so I put ADs first: annual, VOR, 100-hour, altimeter, transponder, ELT. Something you might want to write down or take note of. This is probably one of the first 10 questions asked on a check ride. And you will definitely be asked questions like, how many months between transponder inspections must there be, right, on the actual test? So, to break it down, ADs, airworthiness directives. Does anybody know what an airworthiness directive is? An airworthiness directive is, well, let's say, a couple of years ago, I guess this is just a story I was told, there was a year of Cessna 172s that their wings kept falling off in flight if they did a certain thing, right? I don't know how, you know, it probably happened 3 times, but 3 times is a little more than I'd like my wings to fall off. So what the FAA said, hey, this is a trend. We're going to issue an AD on all of this 2000, I'm making up a year, 2005 Skyhawk 172s, that they must get their wing spars inspected by this date or as soon as possible, right? That is a pretty emergent situation, I would say, if wings are falling off of airplanes. Mm-hmm. So what that did was that grounded all of that year of airplane until those wing spars were inspected. You could not fly, your airplane was not airworthy until that urgent AD got done. There's another kind of airworthiness directive, the less urgent airworthiness directive, okay? Really creative with the names, urgent, not urgent. Where, you know, the seat track kept getting loose in this one airplane. And they're like, is it really that important? No. So what they said is they said, hey, by the next annual or on the next annual, you have to have your seat tracks inspected on that annual. That's a less urgent AD. The airplane was fine to fly. If you wanted to get the inspection done earlier, great for you. But it just needed to be done by the next annual to be airworthy. Now, if you got the annual, didn't have the seat tracks inspected, and then tried to fly it again, that would be illegal. It would not be airworthy. Urgent, less urgent ADs, right? There's no dates on those. They just are as issued, okay? Questions on ADs?
Where do you like find them?
They are posted on the FAA's website, and there's a whole section on ADs. And I'm sure the manufacturer or somebody that, you know, like that sold you the plane, or if a company should reach out in some way, shape, or form. Cool. Annual. So the annual, can anybody guess how long between annual inspections? Shout it out. Wrong. 12 months. It's not 1 year, it is 12 months. 12 calendar months to be specific. They are specific. They will ask you a question on the dang written that says, how often does an annual have to be done? 1 year and 12 months will be answers on that. I'm sure there'll also be like 13 months just to like really spice it up. But the answer is not 1 year. It is 12 months. Okay. We're not gonna fall for that one, right? The annual, they tear down everything, they inspect everything. It's a big inspection, right? They replace the bad things. Questions about an annual? Cool. Got a Blackhawk in, that's exciting. VORs. They're only needed if you are using them, or if you plan on flying IFR, instrument flight rules. You do not need to have them checked before a VFR flight. Does it hurt? No. And there are a couple different VOR checks we'll go over here in a second. And they must be checked every 30 days. Okay. The 100-hour inspection, only if it's for hire or used for flight training. So guess what kind of airplanes get 100-hour inspections? Our training airplanes. Our airplanes get torn apart. It's the same exact thing as an annual inspection. The only difference is who can sign it off. But they still tear down everything. They check everything in this 100-hour inspection. Cool. Has to be done every 100 hours, right? There's no time limit, just 100 hours. If you have your own airplane, you're just putzing around in it, you don't need a 100-hour inspection if you don't want it. All right, altimeter pitot-static system must be done every 24 calendar months. Also, only necessary if you plan on going IFR. The transponder must be inspected every 24 months. Cool. I'm not going to tell you how they inspect the transponder because it doesn't matter and I don't know. Cool. I don't know what they're looking for. And then the ELT, emergency locator transmitter, must be checked every 12 calendar months. And there's a couple more rules, but we'll get into that here in a second. So, how do you remember this acronym? Because there's two things. Not only do you need to remember what AAVIATE stands for, you need to know how often the inspections need to be done. So guess what I think, how I think about it, right? Our imaginary ADs are up here, right? Those are just as issued. Our annuals every 12 months, right? So is the bottom one, 12 months. Opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And then the 24s are in the middle, sandwiched between the 12s, right? So if you remember that 2 of these inspections are 24 and 2 of them are 12, well, you got one that you know should know is 12 months. I don't know about you, but that one's pretty obvious to me. And on the opposite end is the other 12, and then these 2 are sandwiched together. See how my brain is working with that? Might be weird to you, but it works for me. Cool. The annual, we talked about that. The VOR check. Oh, there's a couple different VOR checks that you can do. They do not matter to you. Okay, there's 4. They're allowed to have 4 to 6 degrees of error between your VORs. No biggie. 100-hour. Talked about that. Pitot-static. Required for IFR flight, which said that. All these have to be in the airplane logbook. I didn't say that. So they must be logged. This is what one looks like. It says for this airplane, the inspection was done by this person. Really? Now you decide? It was working for like a good 10 minutes there. So the ELT must also be inspected every 12 months. And if the battery life is less than 50% used, or it's been used for 1 hour total use. Okay, you can check them, you can turn them on, make sure they work. But if you're doing that every single day for 5 minutes, it's going to get to an hour pretty quickly, and then you need to replace your ELT. Not fun. Maybe it'll work. No person can operate an airplane that has not undergone maintenance, preventative maintenance, rebuilding, or alteration unless it has been approved to return to service. An appropriately rated pilot, so not you student pilots, but a private pilot, can do things called preventative maintenance. Oh, not there yet. There we go. You can do things like changing spark plugs, replenishing hydraulic fluid, and servicing landing gear and wheel bearings. Have I ever done any of that? No, they try to keep me out of the maintenance shop. I just break the airplanes for them. They love to tell me that. If you're doing preventative maintenance, you are required to complete the specific paperwork. You must put your signature, certificate number, and the kind of certificate that you're doing. The work must be entered in the logos. I wouldn't do it if I didn't have to, because like I'd rather a real person, not that I'm not a real person, but I'd rather a qualified person change my hydraulic fluid unless I really know what I'm doing.
So if you're doing your own maintenance, what would be the certificate? I mean.
Like a
flight-
private pilot.
Certificate,
Yep.
okay.
Commercial pilot. Each registered owner has to keep records of airplane maintenance. The records must contain all those inspections we talked about. We have maintenance logbooks for the airframe, engine, and propeller. All those things get done for the propeller. And the engine, like 100 hours and stuff like that. And the annual, obviously. Maintenance records are, oh. Did you know if you're trying to sell an airplane and you don't have the logbooks, you're gonna really lose out on a lot of money. The airplanes are super cheap if they don't have logbooks, but that's because then when you buy the airplane, if you want to fly it, you have to bring it to a maintenance facility and they need to go through every single AD that has ever been issued and fix everything because we don't know if it was fixed or not, and do all the like regular work, and they basically rebuild a new maintenance logbook. And that takes a lot of time and effort. We had one in here last year. What's up?
If it doesn't have a logbook, or you're not applied.
Most,
It's
yeah.
a maintenance log.
It's a good question. I assume no. But that's just my assumption. I'm not flying anything that doesn't have a maintenance logbook. And you guys are free to look at maintenance logbooks for the airplanes. If the flight school tells you that you're not allowed to look at the maintenance logbooks, don't fly at that flight school. Okay? Typically, my students don't go looking at the maintenance logbooks too often or ever until a day before their check ride, and they have to tab out that all the inspections are done. But that's pretty standard. That's how I was taught. But you know, a nice rainy ground day, it's nice to look through the maintenance logs.
What kind of maintenance part of the propeller?
100-hour and annual. So like every year, and usually it happens at the same time that the airframe gets done, right?
What do they actually inspect?
I could not tell you. I could bring I think Peter left, but I couldn't tell you what. They're probably
Probably cracks.
cracks,
Probably-
nicks, repaint it, things like that. I really do not know. We talked about ADs. Be found on the FAA's website. I think somebody asked. Required equipment. So, has anybody seen any tomato flames? This is the best acronym. This is like the classic private pilot acronym. How's everybody feeling? Is everybody feeling pumped? Or do we need like a 5-minute break? Yeah, I see. All right, 5-minute break. Saw some head nods. Be back at 42. Yeah, that'd be great.
We used to have drones with underground shadows. They're like, so they saw us in Schwartz. Up at 12 hours, there was like six gypsies and the circle, where that's the engine, you know. That had to be right, so you can go and stuff. And then the holes. That's about it. That's on the airplanes. They're like little bolts. all that. I know that was always part of it. Did you do maintenance? I had no business being around that. That was a choice. That is a volunteer assignment. So, I'm an author, I certainly have. So it comes to tax and stuff. So then. That, maybe one of the time, we were between the sons over the drums betweeners. So much, she knows, like, hey, the chief, he's like, no, we go back to your office, like, right, next to the office, right, we'll be back here. But, so that's because when I left. He always takes one of the copies, and he takes one of the, really well. So it's more than many she's not being put again. I mean, it's cold, the side of stuff off, so I've been hiding in my office. Yes, cold. So yeah, fascinating, everything you need in space. Yeah, yeah. Positive, said, oh, no, man. No, stuff. That just turned me off. Yeah. Well, to rewind, being able to have a career with music. I loved it, but sometimes stuff isn't it. Like sleeps out Halloween. And I was like, okay, done. And there was about a second until I got tired. So like, well, okay, set. And like that, it depends on what morning I wake up. So just don't say that. So like sleep. So you're still on this. So it's yeah. So the so it's basically that so you flew all over one of the pilots there was really about that. And so you little got aviation degree. And then he's over that. No sunshine was you will be happy to put down something. So it's been more than this. I got ahead. It's time to put in around the this.
I know. One thing also there.
Same. Yes. It's not there. But it's so hard. It is honestly, it was like the back. But then you get a job. Super straightforward. That's all those 90 days. So it's like a joke. So it was like, oh, we can wrap it up. It's like, oh. But say different routes that would form. And the one route.
Alrighty. Tomato flames. I recommend just, this is like one of those things that you just have to learn. It will be asked in a bunch of different ways. They're not going to say, hey, what does a tomato flames mean on the written? But you are going to be asked, hey, is this required equipment, such and such. So I wrote it over here, which you probably can't see, I'm realizing now. I'm just gonna list, I'm gonna go through the slides and it's just gonna come up here. Nope, wrong one. No. All right. So these are all things that have to be on the airplane to make it VFR legal. VFR legal, sorry. An altimeter I could read through, but you guys can read. Questions about what any of these are? We'll start with that. Go ahead.
Why is that one different than you?
In which one's different?
So it says altimeter on that, but airspeed on that. And
They're just flipped around.
okay.
Airspeed's here, altimeter's there. There's a couple A's. Write it on your bathroom mirror so you have to stare at it every day. That's what I did. My students say it worked for them. we can make it a little bit easier, right? So we can start with, okay, what are some instruments on the front of the airplane that are required, right? Altimeter would be one, airspeed indicator would be one, magnetic compass would be one, right? Then we have engine stuff, as I like to call it, a tachometer, an oil pressure gauge, manifold pressure gauge, temperature gauge, oil pressure gauge, oil temperature, oil pressure, fuel gauges, and that's it for the engine stuff. And then the third category would be everything else. Does that make sense? How it kind of makes it a little more manageable, right? Everybody good? You're still writing? Cool. That's just talking about some nighttime. We have a couple more things. It's called flaps. So it's tomato flames are going to be required to fly at night, VFR, and also flaps, which would be fuses, landing light, anti-collision light, position light, and source of power. Now I know anti-collision light was said twice. It just makes the acronym work. We're not going to say floops, right? But tomato flames and flaps are required for nighttime. Fuses, just extra fuses for like circuit breakers. Go ahead.
So on the previous slide, turn coordinator is not required.
No, it is not. And you'll see like those little puddle jumpers or the banner towers. Some of those things do not have a 6-pack of instruments. It's a altimeter, a airspeed indicator, and a magnetic compass. They don't have a heading indicator, ball slip, none of that. You don't need it. Do you want to have it? Yes. You did all your training in airplanes that had this equipment. You should probably try to get practice in airplanes that don't have it before you go solo and just go jump in something, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Inoperative equipment. So if any of that stuff, if anything extra is broken, like your turn slip indicator, right? Say that's broken. It's not on the list, so technically it's legal, right? Yeah. If you're comfortable flying, fly. Now I will say you have to placard it INOP. You can literally just put a sticker that says INOP, INOP, on that instrument. One of our Cessnas, the autopilot needs replaced, but you know, for flight training, we don't let you use the autopilot very much anyway, right? It's a nice feature to have, but it's definitely not necessary in any way. I want my students to learn how to fly the airplane before they get to use autopilot. So not a big deal for us, right? So we just placard it in up. It's fine for now, right? It's still there, it just doesn't work. But we have to placard it in up. So items can be in op as long as they're not required by any of these: a minimum equipment list, the kinds of equipment list, airworthiness directives, type certificate data sheets, or 91205. 91205 is the where you would find tomato flames in the FAR. That's just like the title of that page. So the minimum equipment list, as previously discussed, if you use it if you have it, right? Not all airplanes have a minimum equipment list. Like I said, I've never flown something with a minimum equipment list, okay? Otherwise, skip this step, okay? What is on a minimum equipment list? All equipment that does not have to be working, right? I can tell by the absence of answers that you were not following that, right? Everything that does not have to be working is on the minimum equipment list, okay? The kinds of equipment list is a document that tells you specific equipment installed in an aircraft that's specific to the kinds of operation. So when I say kinds of operation equipment list, you're like, oh yeah, right? So day VFR flight is very different from night instrument flying, right? A lot more at risk, a lot more happening, right? I don't go night instrument, I don't fly in clouds at night in single engine airplanes, period. It's a risk I don't need to take, right? What happens when you lose that one engine that you do have? You're screwed. But anyway, at least during the day in the clouds, you have a little bit of time to find a place to land. But anyway, so this will specify what kind of operation you're doing, right? It might also be like, okay, this airplane's used for cargo and skydiving, right? So when you're carrying skydivers, you need to have this equipment does have to work, but if you're just carrying cargo, it's not necessarily required, right? So just say kinds of equipment. This is going to be very in-depth, okay? The KOEL is used as part of the process for determining if the aircraft's inoperative equipment makes it airworthy or not. It's published in the POH or the AFM. Not all aircraft have them, okay? ADs, as previously discussed, if it has an AD, you have to follow the AD, right? So it says, oh, these airplanes now have to have a vertical speed indicator for whatever reason. You have to follow the AD. The type certificate data sheet, it's a formal description of the airplane's engine, propellers, and the aircraft. Lists the equipment limitations and the information required for this type certification, including airspeed limits, weight limits, all that stuff. That piece of paper says that you have to have the equipment, you have to have the equipment. Once again, not all airplanes have these, okay? But if your airplane does have any of those, you have to follow them. Cool? If it does not have them, you can follow 91205, which is a tomato flames. That is the bare bones basic. Cool? And flaps. So we know we have to placard it in off if it's not necessarily required, right? But still broken. What happens if it is required and we can't fix it? Say our airspeed indicator is broken and our maintenance on, say you're at an airport that doesn't have maintenance. Go ahead.
There's like a specialty cert that you can get.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a special ferry permit. Cool. So you'd have to send a application to the FAA, and they will, in a very untimely manner, get back to you and say, yes, you can fly from Chester County to Lancaster to get your airspeed indicator fixed. Now, if something is like really broken, like I don't have an electrical system at all, like it's completely broken, they might not let you do that ferry flight, right? Especially if you're requesting to like go to Philadelphia or something for your maintenance, right? So you might have to pay extra to have maintenance come out to your airport, right? That's usually an option. It just costs a lot more money. But that is what a special flight ferry permit is. Another thing that you can use those for is, say you're rebuilding an airplane, it can fly, you're just not quite done yet, and there's a hurricane coming, right? It'd be nice to be able to relocate your airplane. Now, once again, the FAA is not very timely, so the hurricane will probably already have hit by the time you get approval. But that is another example that to get out of a natural disaster, would be a good reason. Questions on ferry permits? Making decisions with inoperative equipment. If you have done all of your training and all of your flying with, I don't know, a heading indicator, right? It's not required. A mag compass is different. A magnetic compass is different from a heading indicator, right? If you've done all your training with a heading indicator and that thing's inoperative, are you comfortable using that mag compass? Have you used the mag compass, one with just the mag compass?
No, and I don't think I want to.
Yeah, because it's all backwards, right? And there's all those errors and stuff. You guys probably wouldn't be too comfortable doing that. So just because you can, you've heard me say that how many times now, does not mean you should, right? How often does a transponder need to be completed? Oh, say that again. Charlie, not C. How often does the ELT need to be completed? Alpha. The landing light is inoperative and the airplane legal to be flown during the day? Alpha. Which of the following documents are not required to be in the airplane? Delta? We all agree? All right, you're right. Just trying to trick you up. What section in the POH would you find more information on system descriptions? So you guys are already doing better than me. Airworthiness directives are like recalls for a car. Yeah, in a way, right? What FAR handles inoperative equipment? We talked about required equipment being 91-205. If an MEL is approved, must it be followed? All right. Who wants to take the test on paper? Personally, I like paper more, but that's just me. Keep your hand up. All right. All right, put your hands down. Who wants to take it with the QR code? Great. Might need to go downstairs and make a couple more copies. Who would be willing to take it on a device? All right, you guys make sure you get papers last. I actually like the online version. It's not bad. Yes, the password is wait, I'll let everybody who's using the QR code get to that point. You want to write it up on the